Hi, welcome to my channel. Hope all are good. Today I'm going to talk about Spring Web Reactive Framework. What is this? How it has been utilized? What is the intent of this framework? And how market is leveraging these framework libraries. So the use case is very simple. We will build a simple web application where I will have a simple in-memory stored database and I store the user details and then I retrieve the user details. So here I'm going to use microservice based architecture. So I use the Spring Boot and Web Reactive. This is a key to develop the application. Okay. And also we can see what is a MVC architecture which is supported by the Spring. I hope most of you guys know the MVC architecture. Still though we can see it. What is a web reactive and why do we need the reactive? Web reactive is a lightweight application programming model, and it supports asynchronous operations. You can perform uh, multiple calls can be made and collect those results, and based on that results you can further perform few more operations. So nowadays the hardware infrastructure are keep growing up. So the same way the application programming also growing in terms of making concurrent requests as per the demand needs. You can see here the reactive system has certain characteristics. That is the key role playing by this reactive framework. So low latency, that means it will not take a lot of system resources and it will not wait longer time to get the data, and it produces high throughput workloads. You can have an application, say air ticketing reservation system, where if a lot of people are getting registered and then applying for the tickets, yes, we can concurrently handle without any blockages at the system side. That is the beauty of this particular framework. So Spring Reactive is working closely with a project reactor. So collaboratively, they were studying the underlying Java 8, Java 9 fundamentals features which are designed by the Oracle. They are leveraging those underneath to develop these reactive frameworks from the API standpoint of view. That's the advantage. So if you look at it, what they are saying, we can develop enterprise grade reactive systems that are responsive, resilient. Say if one of the call got failed, still you can able to handle by itself. That is the advantage of the resilient. So self-healing and elastic. As demand needs, you can increase the loads on the system side. That is allowed from the programming model. And this is also a message driven means everything based on the context information, it goes and gets and performs the respective operation and gives back the results. Now let us see, this is a familiar architecture. Definitely you might have seen it. So always a web controller which will be coming from your web, say www.abc.com. If you hit the URL, goes to the domain underneath it goes to the respective implementation, the load balancers, and then it reaches to the real backend services. So that's how it is, web designed. So let us first focus on the Spring MVC architecture. So any request is coming from the web browser or any other client to hit the particular URL. The front controller, that is the dispatcher servlet, which will take that request and then it basically delegates to a controller or a REST controller, any one of that. handles the request and makes call to a service layer. Service layer makes call to the database layer. Database layer calls the database and gets the data and creates the model, and then it responds back to the front controller. Front controller basically gives the information back to the client whoever requested. If it is a Tomcat based engine, or if you are using WebLogic or WebSphere, yes, of course, there you will have the application container, which is combination of web container plus EJB container. So this is this one they reused it, and then alongside they come up with webflux is the framework suite they come up with. So now we can see the Spring Boot, how it evolved between synchronous and asynchronous. So you see that Spring Boot to come up with a reactor. This is a reactor is an optional dependency. If you want to build your application either servlet container based, or you wanted to build with the reactive based, yes, of course you can go ahead and do it. The two stacks given the clear differences. Webflux is a non-blocking web framework. That means it allows asynchronous programming model for your application needs, and also it is using multi-core multiprocessor of your new modern infrastructure to handle your concurrent requests. And here, if you look at the right hand side, this is built on the Spring MVC servlet API, and it is a blocking protocol, blocking IO protocol. So blocking means it will wait for some operation. It once the response has come up, then that will respond back to the client who made the call. But in this case, uh, it will be keep calling to multiple calls, and it will collect the results. Depends on the use case. We can see that how one simple exercise I have depicted how these concurrent calls being made using the reactive framework. And here, this is how they come up with. So NetT Servlet 3 plus 3.1 container and reactive streams adapter. And here Servlet API and Spring Security Reactive. Here Spring Security, Spring Webflux, Spring MVC, and the Spring data related all as usual. Hope you might have worked on these stacks. You know the certain basic level, but reactive programming is our interest today. So that is what the invent of this model. It is a non-blocking protocol, and asynchronously applications can be built. So that you can handle the back pressure. Who is handling the back pressure? So they have reused one of the library which they implemented from the Sun Microsystem, that is Oracle. Java util concurrent flow. Flow is the one they used to handle concurrently the requesters, sub publishers, subscribers, subscriptions, all these model they have handled in that particular interface. Flow is the name of the interface. You can go ahead and look at it. So by going with that interface model, they can handle concurrent request. Even though multiple requests has been dispatched, then it is able to collect with the results. Let us now understand Spring Web Reactive components. So we have two sets of components. One is the server side, the other one is the client side. What is the client side? Okay, they have created a fresh API. Web client is then the API. You can use the web client API to make a call to your web point asynchronously, and you can get the results. That is the client side API. Now let us understand the server side. Server side, usually you might have seen that always writing @controller or @rest controller, and then you build request mapping, get mapping, post mapping, whatever, blah 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 blah. The same thing they wanted to achieve little differently in the web reactive model. So they have two sets of components, as I said, handlers which will handle your request, and routes is another module component which will be routing your request. Say that I have a web URL, suppose abc.com slash perform1 slash perform2. These are the two operations which I am performing. So if it is a perform1, if it is a perform2, what action to be called, how to route this request, and what is the corresponding handling fulfillment for that particular request. These things we will be defining it. So whenever I make a call with that particular routing context, I will have a corresponding operation defined in the handler. The handler section will accept that request and then performs the appropriate action within the handler and returns the response back to the caller, and the content has been rendered based on the use case. So Spring Framework exposes two types of APIs, basically mono and flex. Mono means only one object. Say if I are going to get from the database for a particular identifier, say employee ID, you will see only the employee, one single employee record. In that moment you had to use mono. Say if you wanted to get list of employees, so in such cases you need to use the flex. So these two are underneath it implemented reactive framework or Java, as we were seen in the first slide or second slide. So reactive types mono and flex. Reactive streams, as I said, publisher, subscriber, blah blah blah. So they use the Java util concurrent flow is the functional interface. So I was talking concurrently how I can make using this framework. So the Spring framework uses reactor internally for its own reactive support. You can read it, and reactive streams as well. So flux 0 to n, mono 0 to n. That means single object present or not present. Here 0 or many. As I said, the collection list of employees, for example, or single employee. Now you can see that there is a service called reactive service get results that is returning a flux. The flux, you can use that flux with merge with, there is some operation flux interval 100, some milliseconds they put it, then do some next operation, and what is doing there, making a call to service A some observer, and then getting that result, do a map, take on error, resume with error handler feedback. Likewise, you can keep having as many as operations, depends on your need. This is called concurrent operations which is being made. So you can see the mono with any service A, they are doing something, service B, they are doing something, and then they are setting the some timeout as well for the service B, and error handling, do success. Like, these tasks has been performed concurrently on the application side. So let us now come to the simple integration architecture with respect to the source code which I have placed in the GitHub. So I am building a simple web layer which is a routes, that is a web reactive, and handler to handle the request, and database layer which is a in-memory database layer I'm using, that is a map data structure. So locally it is running. To test this application you need to use a create user postman and get specific user by browser or postman. You can use Java web client. Yes, I have one web client as well. You can use your application testing. So what are the prerequisites? These are self-explanatory. You can please go ahead, and these are the reference links. You can go ahead. uh, that's the conceptual. Now let us go to the reality of the use case. Thanks. Yes, I was telling that we are going to use the Spring Web and Spring webflux. So you can see this is the dependency which is enabling to handle the web reactive framework. You can see from the form.xml, and readme dot will give you more details about how do you test it in your local system. So let us understand the database layer, the in-memory model. So which is a component library. I'm using a simple map data structure. Here I'm adding a user from the request which I received, putting into map store and returning mono. Just these are the syntax you need to learn. And I'm getting a specific user by supplying the identifier. I call the map.get and I convert that into mono user. And here you can see that get users, list of users I wanted to get. So I get the list of users and then I use the this approach to return as a flex. That's what I said. Single record we need to use a mono. If it is a multiple, you need to go with the flex. That is how the web reactive underneath implementation supported. Now let us come to the handler. So as I said, let us go to the specific operation and understand. So this is a component user handler. It is being used map store for the database. And let us consider create user use case. So this is a syntax you're supposed to use it. Create user name of your operation. Servlet server request. This is the request object which is supporting by the Spring webflux. So you must have whether you get the data or not in your method level signature. Without that, this will not work. That is the key information. Whoever is willing to develop the Spring Web Reactive. And request.get body. So we get that as a user, whatever the user it received, and then I'm adding it. So to the store, and that will give me a mono, and then I use here server response created. Because this is a fresh record, I am using a server response with created notation. And what is the URL which I am submitting? Slash create user is the URL endpoint which is supporting. So what it is coming with? It is coming with application slash JSON as a content and body user added. So this is the response syntax. You're supposed to write it this way. Now let us try to understand how this is being mapped with the router, like the controller in our use case. In the @REST controller, you might have experienced the same thing, which as a similar structure, you need to configure a route. This route object has a router function with whatever the response type which is returning by the handler, that response function to be casted here as a generic type. And let us go to the method create user. So here we are supplying that handler user handler, and I'm saying that router functions dot route post. This is a post method slash create user. This is the request which is being hit from the browser or any client wherever you are being. This will make use of this syntax notation. If you look at it here, user handler, which user you wanted to and what operation to be performed. This is how the router will accept the request from the user and makes the call to this handler. Handler will receive that request and then store into the in-memory database. So this is a model object I have used here as a user. I'm using Java 14 record, integer ID and username. These two are the attributes of this object. So this is a very simple server-side programming model, and I have the Spring Boot application which I'm enabling it here. And as I said, the clients, two types of clients. One is Spring Reactive client, I can go with it, or I can go with browser. So if I wanted to build through like a Java client, yes, I can definitely do it. How can we do it? So say here I'm initializing web client and let us consider one use case as we were discussing, create user. So I'm passing user object, and then I'm using the web client with the post operation on this, URI endpoint, and then I'm getting the response, whatever the response which is supporting as a body value exchange to mono. So these are the things we supposed to do it and see that whether it is a created or not. So depends on the use case. There are different HTTP statuses available. So if it is available, then I'm returning that as a mono user. If not, I'm setting as a null and returning as an empty. So that's how we can use it as a method creation. And here I'm initializing, this is where it is running my localhost port, building a reactive client. So I am reusing the web client here. So create user, I'm passing 1000 2000 and checking. Yeah, I'm just trying to see if this user is present or not, but actually this user is not there, so it will give you some junk value, whatever which I'm returning it. This is all about available. Let's first start the server. So the programming model, how it goes, the request comes to routes will call the handler will call the database layer, and then gets the data and then presents to the user who submitted the request. That's how the call is being made. So now my server started. So now I'm using Postman to create a user, because as I said, this endpoint is designed with post operation. Okay. So that is the reason, and raw JSON, I'm submitting it. Send. So this record has been created. Now whether it is created or not, I can see in the console, but I want to see the same thing in the in the in the browser level. So I can definitely see that. Now you can see that this is created. Let me try to run a web client as well. So web client has a different data sets created. So this ID is 1000. Whether this is also going to store or not, we can verify it, because these are two different clients. Definitely we can use and hit the endpoints. Now I'll go ahead and see 1000, whether that data is stored or not. Yes, that data also stored. So that means I can use either web client or the Java based client to make the call. I can do a lot of operations as I have depicted in the PowerPoint. Definitely you can go ahead and try. This is the upcoming programming model from the Spring standpoint of view, because this is a very high demand, as it is a non-blocking and asynchronous task can be performed. So that's all about this demonstration. Code is available in the Git, and README file is also available. Please go ahead and read this. And if you're interested to learn more, please subscribe, watch, and like if you are interested. That's all about today's session. Thank you. Have a nice day.